Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado thinks he's got the right stuff to run New York State. So what's the right stuff? What do you want to do for New York State?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
I think it's important right now more than ever that we move past the status quo. I think there's a real thirst out there right now for driving down the cost of living, whether it's housing, whether it's child care, whether it's health care. And I think for a very long time, those trend lines for the typical New Yorker across the state have been going in the wrong direction. And the numbers bear that out. You know, 1 in 5 kids right now live in poverty. 1 in 4 New Yorkers can't afford basic necessities, be it groceries, be it housing. And I think when you combine that with the fact that we had the largest wealth inequality gap in the country right here in New York, there's a reason why we saw the largest swing from left to right in the country right here in New York.
How would you deal with the equality gap, the gap between the rich and the poor in New York State? Are we talking tax the rich? Are we talking other programs?
I think there's 2 different ways to do that. I think raising revenue, certainly on the ultra wealthy and big corporations, is a part of that. The governor has refused to do that at any point over the course of her administration, which I think is not the right approach.
Is that a mistake?
Yes. I think it's also a mistake to not reevaluate the manner in which we leverage tax subsidies and credits in the name of economic development. We give a lot of these things out to the private sector without really getting a return on investment. We should be reevaluating how we spend public dollars and reinvest those dollars directly into folks who need it the most.
But every other word out of Governor Hochul's mouth is the word affordability. I'm not going to raise taxes on the rich because I'm concerned about affordability. I'm not going to do it while people are concerned about how they're going to buy groceries and pay their things. You think that's a wrong approach?
Those 2 things don't go together. If you are trying to make sure that folks have the ability to afford housing, for example, if you can't afford your rent right now, and as right now, 7 out of 10 New Yorkers would be eligible for rental assistance from the federal level, but they can't get that rental assistance right now because the governor only will put forward a $50 million pilot program, which, by the way, was not included in her executive budget. It was only included after legislative bodies said, we want $250 million. $250 million. Her retort was $50 million in the middle of a housing crisis. So when you have to think about how to directly affect folks who are on the ground hurting, the state can step up when it actually raises revenue, when it actually reallocates public dollars and gives those dollars directly to the folks who need it the most. She said recently in an interview that she was worried that folks would move to Palm Beach. But the folks who are leaving New York, the vast majority of folks who are leaving New York, they're not moving to Palm Beach. They make between $30,000 to $60,000 a year.
But she's worried. But the thing is, there have been statistics that show that approximately 6,000 or 7,000 people in New York pay the bulk of the taxes. So if you drive the people who can pay the taxes out of New York to wherever they go, that's going to hurt the revenues that you're going to be able to spend on making lives better for people who don't have as much.
Let's focus on the corporate tax rate, for example, which she allowed to sunset this past year. The corporate tax rate is there's 19 other states, some neighboring, that have higher corporate tax rates than New York does right now. And whether you live in New York or not, as a corporation, you pay that rate. So what is the logic in that regard? There is no logic. So
well,
if we're going to try to raise...
that people are going to go to New Jersey or Connecticut or some of the surrounding states, or even to move to, you know, the Midwest, or to move to Florida, places where there are lower tax rates.
Who's moving? The people who are moving are making between $30,000 and $60,000 a year, Marcia. $30,000 and $60,000. They can't afford where they live. And this has been a trend line for decades. And I think that speaks to the fact that there hasn't been any real bold transformational change that has been driven by a commitment to reassessing how we are allocating public dollars. Instead, entrenched economic and political interests have more or less maintained this dynamic over time, and it's left communities behind. And that's just not in the city, that's all across the state, in rural areas upstate as well.
See, when people talk about affordability, they talk about things like rent, which you've talked about, high electricity rates.
Another good example.
What are you going to do about that?
So that's another example where we're not taking steps to rein in the concentration of corporate power. You look at a lot of the monopolies that more or less are allowed to jack up these rates without any oversight.
Let me ask you a question. When Con Ed or any of these power companies goes to the Public Service Commission and says, this is what we want for a rate hike, we want 10%, 12%, how can you say to them you can't have it when they say, well, we're not going to be able to fix the system? I mean, how can you make power cheaper for people who are really hurting?
A couple ways to do that. One, in response to the folks who come and say, we need this kind of hike. Why do they need that kind of hike? because they're typically taking those dollars and investing them in outdated, outmoded pipelines that actually don't fix the problem and don't create green energy.
So
they just build in
how do you
costs.
get up-to-date pipelines? That costs a lot of money too.
No, what you do is you shift the focus on green energy and renewable energy sources.
The president is against all that stuff, wind power and things like that. And the
So
only
we should be as well?
And the governor is saying, let's build a nuclear power plant upstate. Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, I'd like to see a plan for that. Announcing that you're going to do that,
it's always
which is
the devil in the details.
Exactly. And I think what's not helpful, in my opinion, is when you say at the same time, we're going to roll back investment in solar, which we know is the fastest way to grow energy, the cheapest way to grow energy, and it creates most jobs, hands down. But we're backtracking. It's also not helpful when you say we're going to potentially allow permitting for gas pipelines through New York that have been previously banned decades ago in a way that suggests that we're not committed to our goals, our climate goals.
But the governor tries to say that she's the greenest governor we've ever had.
I think she's wrong. And I think if you look at where we are right now, whether it's around our commitments to renewable energy sources that are robust, you look at the Cap and Invest, what happened to that program, right? You look at the way in which we're seeing backsliding, again, on the gas pipelines. These are all indicative of somebody who, in my estimation, is not actually robustly committed, and in fact is using it as a negotiating tactic to work with the president, who, by the way,
I was just going to get
I know,
to that.
I could read your mind. No, but
I mean, seriously, I mean, she did say that when she met with the president, she said that he wants a new gas pipeline to come down. And the other thing is, there's being pressure from the mayor of the city of New York to get that pipeline, because that pipeline will service 1 million people in New York City. A
mayor, by the way, I thought should have resigned.
Okay, let's talk about that.
A while ago. I'm just saying, I think this speaks to the larger dynamics we're in right now. We're compromised as a state. So when you invoke the mayor, you're talking about a mayor who's basically allowed Trump to sort of get the keys to the city along with him and Homan.
But what's wrong with saying you want a pipeline that's going to reduce power costs to 1 million people in the 5 boroughs?
This outdated and it's outmoded, and we have better opportunities to actually grow energy sources that will create jobs and bring down the cost of energy that are actually climate friendly and more productive. Why are we backtracking? I guess is the better question from my standpoint. Why are we doubling down?
Sounds like a generational change.
I think it's a future-forward outlook that is rooted in science, that is rooted in protecting our environment, but it's also rooted in bringing down costs. And I do want to get back, if I can, to these monopolies that come up and jack these prices. There's legislative bills out there that would do a great job of capping to what extent they can do that. There's an opportunity, if you have a partner in the executive who's willing to take this step, who's willing to ruffle a few feathers and, uproot some of these entrenched interests, are willing to do that work. I'm one of them. And we need to be in a position right now where we have individuals in the executive who are not here to maintain or protect the status quo. And we saw that with the mayor's race. I think there's a real thirst right now for folks who are willing to take on business as usual, politics as usual. And I think that's where there's a real distinction between myself and the governor.
But here, I mean, we only have about 30 seconds left, but all the poll says is going to beat you and everybody else.
I think the polls that you're referring to, I think, have her at 37% in terms of the state popularity.
But also, they say that if she ran against any Democrat or Republican, she does win.
I think that same poll you're talking about has her coming in at under 50% against all of her Republican
50%.
Opponents. That's not good. And I think it speaks to the fact when you combine that with the idea that we've seen a shift from left to right, the largest in the country right here in New York. We're not going to win in 2026 if all we're doing is talking about fighting against Trump. The people want to know, what are we fighting for? Is it going to be health care? Is it going to be child care, housing? What are those bold ideas?
We're going to have to leave it right there for now, but we'll be right back. We are back with Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado. So I want to ask you about, there's 2 things that you've split with the governor on. Number 1, you called for Eric Adams, the mayor of the city of New York, to resign. And number 2, you endorsed Zohran Mamdani for mayor of the city of New York while she has been reluctant to do that. What lessons do you take from the way he was able to run a race where it looked like it was a come from behind, he was low in the polls, and suddenly he wins? Is that the kind of thing and the kind of campaign that you're looking to run?
Well, I think what he tapped into is a desire to take on the status quo, a desire to get beyond politics as usual. And I think, as you know, a lot of younger voters came out that typically don't come out in election cycles.
How are you going to get younger voters out?
Well, I think it's important that, one, you talk about issues that are going to be about change. People want to feel like we're moving towards a direction that is different than where we currently are. And so if all you are doing is saying the same things that don't indicate we're going to change anything on the ground, then people are not going to come with you, especially younger people. And I think what he was able to do with his campaign focused intensely on affordability. Is this idea that people...
focused as a socialist. Are you going to focus as a socialist?
Well, I'm not a socialist. And we don't, agree on every single issue. But I think where there's a lot of common ground is our focus on working folks who are being left behind in a system where there is rampant economic inequality. And if we're not willing to take that system on to some degree, then we will continue to see folks either check out politically and ultimately leave the door wide open for authoritarian figures and divisive figures, or like the president, or put ourselves in a position where we at least begin to build a bench of folks, and a coalition, I should say, of individuals who are willing to say we can be better, we can do better. And that does mean having a partner, if you're Mandami, in Albany, who is willing to engage on revenue raisers, because that's going to be part of any process that's going to help in moving us in that direction. But it's also about revisiting how we budget. It's also about revisiting our regulatory regime and how we make it easier for small businesses to grow and prosper. We don't have any accountability right now, is the point in state government. It's just, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat.
So here's the bottom line. One of the things he's said is that he wants to tax the rich. And you have a situation where the governor of the state of New York has already said that's dead on arrival. So how is he going to be able to get his agenda passed when the chief executive who currently exists in Albany is going to say no?
And I think the point you just raised, dead on arrival, and this is not a new approach from the governor. Consistently, year after year, it has been totally taken off the table. There's been no room for debate. And now we're actually having this, while we're dealing with what's going on in Washington, massive cuts that are coming on the pipeline with healthcare.
How is the state going to handle all these massive cuts? The cuts to Medicare and Medicaid and cutting people's health care. How is the state going to find the money for that and to be able to do the other things that you want to do in an election year?
How's it going to find the money for any of it if there's not a conversation at all about raising revenue, about
So you support taxing the rich?
I definitely support making sure that we raise revenue, whether it's ultra wealthy, whether it's big corporations, but it's also about making sure that we think about how to reevaluate the money we're already spending. I want to be clear about that. $254 billion we spend, right? That's the budget. That's the third largest economy in the country, the eighth if we were an independent nation in the entire world. And if you ask any New Yorker, do you feel the effects of that? Whether it's in transportation, healthcare, housing, the answer repeatedly would be no. So it's not as simple, and I'd be careful to say that if we're going to raise revenue, tie it to a program, whether it's universal childcare, whether it's universal pre-K, whether it's a rental assistance program, tie it to a meaningful, impactful program.
Because that makes it more palatable to people?
Well, it makes sense. You're actually using the money in the way that it should be. Right now, we have a lot of money out there, $254 billion. We have no idea where the benefits are going. Every year, we're seeing economic inequality grow, but yet we're spending $254 billion. So we do have to reassess how we are spending public dollars and what is getting in the way of that. A Second Avenue subway extension costs $7.7 billion. Really? And the state has to have a $186 million consulting contract to facilitate that because it has no capacity.
You said we shouldn't extend the Second Avenue subway?
No, what I'm saying is we need to reevaluate why there's so much cost behind everything that we do for public goods. There's a lot of middlemen.
Is there a way to cut it?
Yeah, I think first you got to audit these systems. You got to be willing to take these interests on.
You don't think the MTA is trying to find a better way to do these things cheaper?
I know that if I was governor, I'd make it a point to figure it out.
So let me ask you this. This is another thing that Mr. Mamdani wants to do. He wants free bus service. Mm-hmm. If you were governor, you would have a lot of say in that because you'd have to find the money to pay for free bus service. Is it possible for the MTA, if you were governor, to find the money to pay for free bus service for everybody?
Here's what I think is important. We have to have an open mind about what we can and cannot do and what's practical. And I think the important takeaway here is if you take off the table altogether raising revenue, as the governor has decided to do from the very beginning, you basically are saying all these ideas, whatever you're thinking about doing, from busing to housing, you name it, none of it's going to get fixed. None of it. And while you're doing that, you're also not willing to evaluate where's the money going right now, the $254 billion. So the two things that you would need to do.
So you say there's a lot of waste in the budget.
There's a lot of waste. And not just that, the way we actually budget, honestly, is a waste.
In what way?
The process. Currently, it is not collaborative.
Well, it's 3 people.
It is not collaborative. And
how would you change that?
Well, I think one way to change it is to actually have a process where the governor's going to hole up somewhere, whatever his or her advisors are, and think about what to force into the budget, and then go to the legislative body and say, figure this out.
But you know that the way Albany works is that people want certain things, you know, member items, dare I say it, and other things, other programs that are near and dear to their hearts. So as part of the process, a lot of these things that you and I might say aren't necessary are put into the budget because that's the politics of it. How do you change that?
This is a great question, the way Albany works. Right, so the question has to be, how do we change Albany? Because
how
right now,
do you change
leadership.
Albany?
I think leadership is a big part of that. And I think there are folks in Albany, in the Senate, in the state Senate, in the Assembly, who I know, who I've engaged with, share with me this desire to want to change things, to want to make things better, to want to bring more accessibility and transparency to government, and to do so in a fashion where there's more collaboration, not just within the Democratic side of the aisle, but across the aisle too. Keep in mind, I won in a district that was 90% white, the 8th most rural congressional seat in the country, and no Democrat had ever won. So I bring a history, a track record of success when it comes to trying to find out where there's common ground and where we can actually get things done collectively. Am I going to sit here and tell you it's going to be easy? Absolutely not. But am I going to tell you it's necessary? Yes, it's very necessary right now.
So one of the things that Zohran Mamdani wants to do is have city-run supermarkets that they can charge wholesale prices. Of course, this has caused a huge hue and cry among bodega owners, supermarket owners, etc. But if this idea works, would you try to do it statewide if you were governor?
Well, what I like about what he's at least trying to do across the board with a number of the policies is pilot programs, right? You figure out what makes the most sense. Again, these are all things that...
Would you try a pilot program in the state?
I think in this case, I think we need to see how things would materialize in the city if that were to move forward, right? So, and that's the beauty of having localities, right? With local officials.
So New York City will be the guinea pig.
Well, I mean, we're all trying to figure out collectively what's the right way forward. I think from my vantage point, my focus areas, as I've said, would be on housing, would be a statewide, permanent statewide rental assistance program. From my standpoint, it'd be working on getting the profit motive out of our healthcare system and fully reimbursing our hospitals across the state, our Medicare, our medical providers across the state who are basically on the front lines dealing with the most needy. Universal child care, which would mean making sure that we have a livable wage for child care workers, who a lot of them right now live in poverty. And of course, universal pre-K. These are things that we are not pushing towards right now in New York. And these are things that I'd want to be focusing on as governor of New York.
So after you indicated that you wanted to run for governor, the governor of the state of New York cut your staff, cut your funding, took away offices, did all kinds of things. How has that hampered your ability to function as still the lieutenant governor of the state of New York? Yeah,
I mean, I do think it's unfortunate that those steps were taken because I am somebody who's serving not at the pleasure of the governor. I'm serving because the people of New York
you were elected.
They elected me. And I have a responsibility in this position to serve the people of New York. And we shouldn't bring politics into official.
So are you angry about that?
I think it's unfortunate, you know, and I think that as we see with Trump and the ways in which he leverages his power for political ends, and we all, I think, rightfully are uneasy about that. I don't think that we should be hypocritical if we're going to be uneasy about that.
So you're saying this is a Trumpian move?
What I'm saying is that we need to be careful about how we leverage power. And this cuts across the board because ultimately who gets hurt? And this is why, going back to your point about where we parted ways on Biden, it's also why I thought it was important to say Biden should step down. I loved Biden. I thought he was somebody that I long admired. But at the end of the day, my focus wasn't on the political dynamic within the party and whatever the fallout might be. Again, power. My focus was on the people, and my loyalty fundamentally was to the people. And if we don't move our perspective as political actors away from party politics and towards the people and what they're going through, we will continue to lose their respect and their trust and their confidence. And it's not going to matter what we say. And so it is important, no matter federal, state, local, that we act accordingly, and we always put the people at the center. So yes, I've had my staff cut. I've had offices taken from me, which again has limited my footprint. But nonetheless, I am an elected official. I am moving around the state. I am connecting with folks from all different backgrounds and walks of life. And it's exciting to still be in this position as Lieutenant Governor of the great state of New York, which I take great pride in.
So take your best shot. Tell our viewers why you, Antonio Delgado, would be a better governor for the state of New York than the one we already have.
I'm willing to do what is required for change. I'm not here to maintain the status quo. I'm not here to manage the status quo. I'm willing to do things that are going to allow us to have change, whether it's in housing, whether it's in childcare, whether it's in healthcare. I'm going to push an agenda that makes sure that every New Yorker is not left behind. And we have a governor right now, if you look at the track record, where it is hard to find where that kind of progress has been made and what kind of steps have been made over the course of her administration that would lead us down a road where we believe affordability is in fact being tackled, not just talked about, but indeed tackled. And that's, to me, the important distinction here. You have to be willing to take on entrenched issues and interests. You have to be willing to say, this is what I believe and I'm going to stand on this, even if certain parts of the state or certain entrenched special interest groups might be upset about it.
But that's going to mean that you're going to have to stand up and say to the power companies like Con Ed and Orange and Rockland and all these power companies, you can't have your raise. It's going to mean you standing up to the people who have contracts with the MTA and say, I think you're charging me too much. It means you're going to have to stand up to people who provide childcare and education and all of these other things and say, I'm not sure it's as economical as it should be. Do you have what it takes to stand up to all these interests and say, you're charging too much, we're not going to pay you?
What it requires is political courage. And before that, what it requires is a sense of moral responsibility. And I'm not involved in political life to play a political game. I'm involved in political life because I give a damn about people. And I love people deeply. And I want to change what is going on right now. And it is very important for us right now in this moment to step up and put our best foot forward. So yes, whatever comes with that, I'm prepared. Not just I'm prepared, I know the people are prepared with the appropriate leadership to navigate through that. Otherwise, we're going to keep running in place, and it's not going to be good, as we're already seeing.
Antonio Delgado, thank you for joining me, and thank you at home for joining me as well.